It is now my pleasure to bring to the stage our conference co-host, Jamie Leigh of Cooley, who will be leading a conversation with Stephani Lewis, General Counsel and Chief Diversity Officer of IKEA North America, and Lisa Mango, General Counsel of One Medical. Please join me in welcoming the guests for our next session.
Good morning. Such a pleasure to see everybody again today. I hope you had a nice evening. I am delighted to talk about the Talent Wars 2.0 today. We face this, of course, in all of our organizations. Precisely 2 weeks ago, we sat and talked through what we thought was most compelling for our discussion today. And of course, in the intervening period, we've had a rash of news with respect to specific layoffs, more general layoffs, and probably an ever-changing landscape from here for the next 12 to 18 months. So I'm going to let my really wonderful colleagues introduce themselves for a little bit so you can understand exactly what they do in their respective roles, and we'll tuck in.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Stephani, but everyone calls me Stevie, a childhood moniker. So that's where I am on LinkedIn. I am the General Counsel and Chief Diversity Officer for IKEA in the US. I've held the role for a little bit over 2 years. IKEA, as you know, is a global organization. I run a small team for an organization our size. I have about 11 attorneys, each with a specific discipline. And together we manage all of the different entities and projects, et cetera, that we oversee in the US. In my Chief Diversity Officer role, I created the diversity strategy as we moved from 2021 into 2022. And I will hold that title until about 2024.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Mango. Very excited to be here today, so thank you for listening to us. I am the Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel at One Medical. One Medical, and I look over the legal, compliance, and government affairs teams. One Medical is human-centric, tech-enabled national primary care provider. We have almost over 200 clinics in about 30 markets nationwide, and we also combine our in-clinic experience with 24/7 telehealth. That's available in every state. I joined One Medical in 2016. There were 2 of us. Since then, I now have a team of almost 30 people, but that's sort of grown just in the last year or so. And prior to being at One Medical, I spent time, most of my career has been in-house, working for either small venture-backed companies, or I spent a good amount of time at Autodesk, which is an international design software company. In my role, I do spend a good amount of time, and I have in my past, working with the Chief People Officer and her team. One, because the issues are often very interlinked, and 2, because I actually really like it. And so I like to get to know the Chief People Officer and work with them. So anyhow, I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have a little help with the clock? I don't think we started ticking down, and I'm pretty sure you want us to talk forever, but just in case you don't, if you could give us, I don't know if you want to whack some minutes off it. Cool, thanks. Quiet quitting. We're all very excited to talk about quiet quitting because it's the thing we're not really supposed to talk about in polite company, I think. I don't actually walk down the halls and ask people if they're quiet quitters, although it would probably make for some entertaining gossip after I left the hall. I'm really curious what you are seeing in your respective marketplaces and in your organizations. Are you talking about quiet quitting? What are you seeing, Stevie? Are you addressing it? Are you just hoping for the best, waiting it out? How do you see this trend?
So it's interesting. My legal career was based in labor, and I segued into doing labor and employment at IKEA. And actually, labor and employment is our biggest spend. And so our workforce as a demographic there are lots of dynamics that are going on. I think just like the term the Great Resignation became coined post-pandemic or maybe during the pandemic, I think quiet quitting is sort of the other half of that coin. But I see it broken down, sort of bifurcated in two ways. I think that there have always been quiet quitters. We just never had a term for it. I think that there are some where this manifests as sort of this psychological withdrawal from doing anything over and above or beyond is a reaction to maybe having to come back into the office. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. But then you also have what's been around for a long time, which is the relationship with the manager. So it's a symptom of not only a reaction to post-pandemic policies and work cultures and environments, but also the manager relationship. And just as people leave managers more than they leave organizations, I don't think quiet quitting is all that different. We've seen it in different contexts. Our business is split, so we have those in stores and we have those in corporate, and so it really depends on the environment the coworker is in. But we like to focus on the relationship with the manager to make sure that the engagement returns.
And Lisa, in talking a little bit before the panel, you really addressed quiet quitting as sort of an outcry or a description of what people are really needing in the workplace post-pandemic. Could you talk a little bit about how you see that tie with respect to what are people needing today that maybe is leading to more quiet quitting behavior?
Sure. Being at a healthcare provider, probably our number one issue is burnout. And not that other folks don't have that, but, the providers have been, and the staff supporting them have been in the trenches for the past several years now. And so, whether it's quiet quitting or real quitting or just, lack of engagement, we as a leadership team have thought about different ways we can get people back engaged and deal with this burnout, perhaps a little bit of the weariness. And so, each team has taken different paths to doing that. From the legal compliance and government affairs team, I kept promising my team that there'd be a break. Right after we did the IPO, I was like, there'll be a break. And of course, 6 weeks later, we had the pandemic. And then in the midst of all that, we bought a $2 billion Medicare company. And then, as some of you may know, we're in the middle of a transaction with Amazon. So they don't believe me that there's going to be a break anymore. So I have to come up with other options for them. I've tried really hard to make sure that there's self-care and time off. Taking PTO and not bringing your laptop. I haven't done that. I did that once recently, but I want my team to do it so I could be a better example. But I think for our team, the most important thing, whether it's quiet quitting, or maybe even thinking about leaving, is getting them re-engaged in the mission. Now, I said that sounds like corporate speak. Everybody has a mission. But, what's nice about at One Medical, you actually can see your impact on real people on a daily basis because we care for patients. And so one of the things we do, and we've been increasingly doing with the corporate folks, is something called CI Care Rounds, where we go into the clinics, we meet the providers, we meet the staff, we meet with patients, we sometimes observe patient visits. And I always am like, oh God, I have to do CI Care Rounds today, I gotta get all this other stuff out. And every time when I come back from that, I am just pumped up about kind of the work we do because I can see the real world impact. And so we've been really I've been trying to get my team more integrated with the daily business to inspire them more. And that probably has had more of an impact than, me enforcing PTO. We do fun stuff. We try to make sure that when we get together, we don't just talk about work. We have fun activities. We bring the remote team in on a regular basis so everybody can be together and engaged. But I think for us, the most important thing is getting people excited about the mission. And that seems to, have a big impact.
I think at the law firm level, we are strongly of the mind that return to engagement is more important than return to office. And personally, I have really had to discipline myself to create time to be slower in the office or in the personal one-on-one. We have lived these lives for so many years now in the pandemic where we just scheduled everything back to back to back in whatever little chunks would fit the schedule from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. And so I have been challenging myself to really think about where are slow times during the day that I can block out and kind of allow myself to be at a more personal human pace. And I'll report back next year when we get to do this panel again. So in that vein of sort of return to engagement and handling what will be for the foreseeable future a combination, remote and in-person environment, sort of a lot of discussion around where's your headquarters, what are our views of in-person versus remote, how do we handle building talent teams that may have variability in the way that they connect for the foreseeable future. What are the organizational challenges, Stevie, in your business, which just isn't really a remote business model? How are you seeing post-pandemic challenges and opportunities?
Well, it's definitely been interesting. I don't think IKEA is immune from all of the other challenges that large organizations have had. I think that our business is there's a value ecosystem that we operate under where, because we're based in Sweden, the idea of this socialist mentality that we all treat each other the same. We don't have offices, it's open environment, and so there tends not to be a focus on the demarcation whether you work in a warehouse or a store or in our corporate office. However, it's not the reality when it comes to remote and hybrid working. So during the early stages of the pandemic, only our warehouses were open. Our retail units were closed for a while. When retail units opened, the corporate office was still closed. And there was a lot of discussion about what the corporate office should be doing, just from a perspective of we're all in this together, and if we have some of our coworkers having to go in on a daily basis, what the corporate philosophy and approach would be. The family that owns IKEA did not envision it as a remote organization, but the realities of our working conditions and attracting talent, will all come into play as factors here. And so we have to be realistic about it. So we're still navigating and adapting to it, but I think that there's no perfect answer. I don't think anyone has found a solution. But as we continue to move forward, I think we have optimized what we can, and we will continue to just adapt and hopefully create a framework where we can get the most out of everyone.
And Lisa, you have a very different office environment than an IKEA-like space. Although sometimes maybe it feels a little bit like IKEA when you're dealing with so many different constituents. What's the evolved sort of headquarters vibe for you guys at One Medical, and how are you bringing back, the wistful days of the hallway conversation and water cooler talk? What does that look like for you at One Medical today?
So yes, this is a oft-debated topic amongst not just the leadership team, employees in general. I mean, somewhat similar to IKEA, we do have providers and office staff in our clinics, right? So they have to go into the office every day, and they had to go into the office every day during the pandemic too. We were open during the pandemic. We're healthcare providers, right? And so we started with a little bit of an inequity when we had to, when folks were fully remote from the corporate offices. Our primary corporate office is here in San Francisco, just a couple blocks down at One Embarcadero. And then we have another one, a smaller one in New York City. So even when it was against the law to come into the office in San Francisco, there still was consternation that, the office staff was putting themselves at risk. What's the corporate doing? As the pandemic has evolved and people are coming back into the office, we decided to take, from the corporate perspective, each leader would take their own approach on how they wanted to handle it. We have several folks on our executive team who are not in the Bay Area anymore, so they had a different approach to getting their teams together. They would, not do it every week, but they would ask people to come into the SF headquarters maybe once a month for a day or two, or once a quarter. Some other folks on the executive team, including me, asked my local team to come into the office, 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, hopefully the same day, so we could be together. So we have the wide range of options that each leader is, deploying based on their team needs. I would say it sometimes puts me in an awkward position. They're like, well, why don't they have to come in on the Tuesdays and Thursdays? But here's what I say, and I understand remote work. I actually have fully appreciated the power of remote work, and particularly for people who have kids, parents, or other animals to care for. I was lucky during the pandemic. My kids were not running around like crazy. Had it been 10 years earlier, that would have been the case, and trying to do my work. But my philosophy has been that it was the in-person connections that we had when we first had to go fully remote that really helped us succeed as a team being fully remote. And you can do that over Zoom, and we've all adjusted to that. But there's something about that personal interaction, I think, that really helped build that trust. And you've seen somebody and looked them in the eye. Secondly, I think, as I told Jamie, like the efficiency of, we have an open environment too, and it's the efficiency of the over your screen, like, hey, did you manage to do this? Or you're walking down the hallway with like one of my, colleagues, and I'm like, here are the 3 things that I really need to talk to you about, but I didn't feel like going to your EA to schedule Zoom or, find a right time to call you. So I'm selfish, I love the convenience of that. And finally, we do have some more junior team members on the legal compliance and government affairs team. I think they really benefit from having folks there in the moment to ask questions to, and just to listen to the conversations, because it's an open environment. So we will say, okay, how do you want to approach this issue on this contract? I'm advising X leader about this. So I worry about the more junior folks on our teams that don't have that. Plus they're young and fun, and they want to come into the office and have a group of people to go happy hour with, and that's not really happening. So at One Medical, the net is we have a hybrid approach. Some teams come in on a regular basis. Some teams come in more intermittently.
I think it's a evolving conversation for sure, and I appreciate your remarks on that, Stevie, with such different expectations of the owners of your business as opposed to the daily operators. And I think about that model a lot from a law firm perspective. In M&A, we have a national team, so while we have wonderful offices with fantastic flexible places to work and huddle and team on things, it was never been the case for us from an M&A perspective that we had the luxury of in-person hallway all the time. And I think a lot about our teams, particularly in law firms that are staffed away from clients in different locations from experts in their fields in any particular matter. And I get a little bit concerned about the pressure that's now on some of our more junior employees, as you described. So our more junior associates and our staff are not always in the places that they can have that bonus of what's in it for me if I actually come to the office. And so thinking of ways that we can really ensure that there's not, we're not just simply adding pressure over the top to people's commutes or God help us if people start using the concept of FaceTime again in corporate rhetoric, but ways to make life still feel manageable and doable, and that personal connection is really worth it. If you're going to come into the office, have it be something that feels right. So for sure, we're evolving, and we'll probably be talking about this for many years to come on panels just like this. So thank you for sharing, because I think it's also a little bit awkward sometimes to talk about really where we are, because we're in the infancy, right, of returning to work and figuring out how our employee base is really interested in that engagement and at very, very different levels generationally.
And Jamie, before we move on, I just want to make one more comment. I think one of the big benefits also of a remote model, fully remote model, is we've been able to expand where we recruit and hire people. And so that brings not just, standard diversity, but it brings, people from all over the country who can bring in different viewpoints, because we don't have an office in Iowa, but we have someone who works there, right? And so I think I appreciate that value as well. And so if you have the ability to get those people to come and meet with them occasionally, I think it works. But I mean, remote work has really worked for us to increase the candidates that we can recruit from. So it has that benefit too.
So it's the day after Election Day. Let's for sure talk about politics. Politics and social movements in the office and the role of employers in thinking through the topics of the day have never been more complex. We added more than our fair share of that into the remote work environment as well, further complicating, I think, the ability of people to be human with each other as they worked through really challenging social times. So I'm curious how you address employee expectations about the workplace addressing politics or social movements, and the public position that you do or do not take, as an employer, and how you manage that as, regardless of what your HR teams are like, you in the legal office are oftentimes the intermediary between social movements or politics, because they're quite legal in nature. And I think the very first call is to you guys, probably, when you're thinking through how to communicate around those issues in the employment context. So very different workplaces, all three of us, probably from that angle. But I would say at the law firm, I'll go first because this is a harder topic. We have always thought of ourselves as lawyers as, stewards to the community, right? Not just because if you take the bar, you also provide an oath to be of service to your community in one way or another, but because, we are employers of a vast, broad, diverse employee base, and we are in our communities in ways that, matter to us. And so I think the overarching theme, at least from my perspective, I obviously don't speak for the entire firm, but is to think about ways to be better stewards of more open conversation, of allowing different viewpoints to come to light, and to not shy away from the difficulties of the discussion or the difficulties in taking positions, and being conscious and thoughtful when we did take positions this year in George Floyd, on Dodd, on some of the other sort of social movement issues that are based in certain geographies. We were outspoken about those. And I'm very proud of us for doing that, but I also need to be cognizant and conscious of the fact that when you speak for a really broad community, you are by definition maybe not being as inclusive of all voices, because that's just simply not possible in today's environment to be 100% all aligned all the time. So in that gray area and in your very, very different business models, I'm curious if you could talk, Stevie, about being a non-US company in this environment and how you hold yourself in the role sort of as intermediary between probably some really different concepts of the role of the employer.
Yeah, so it's been very interesting. I think from a global perspective, the focus has been on, we have 33 IKEA countries, and they're all very, very different. While the U.S. is complex from a diverse perspective, we are in countries where women are subjugated to certain roles, and we have countries where religion prohibits certain activities, and so to think about an approach that would work globally, it's just not possible. So also being private, there's a lot of intention on what we communicate internally versus externally, and that decision and where that demarcation is. I think as the legal team in the US on all of these issues, our partners, of course, are HR and communication. So I think where we would love as a company, just because of the value system that we espouse, to come out with strong positions on certain topics, you know, there's sort of this broader picture in mind that we have to always be cognizant of. On the U.S. side, though, I think it was the event in 2020 that just shocked not only the U.S. but the world, and the impact it felt when George Floyd was murdered. And it gave birth to, we have to put a stake in the ground on diversity and create a strategy and stop just talking about it. So I think that there are good things that can come from social movements and events. I think that sometimes the issue becomes, how do you navigate the different views that you are going to have when you have, 18,000 employees in the U.S. I think that in a situation where we have had some of our coworkers engage in activities that would otherwise not be acceptable, then the social movement that it's aligned with is really irrelevant. The behavior is just not acceptable. I think that there are situations where we've taken a position internally about who IKEA is, what we stand for, and what we will not stand for. And based on that, we've said IKEA may not be the place for you. And so for IKEA to be firmly rooted on some of these issues is new territory. I think that the U.S., IKEA U.S. has been sort of on the forefront of moving some of these issues forward. On the healthcare and Dobbs, there was a lot of internal discussion. There was a lot of sort of debate on what we communicate, but we took positions internally that we're proud of. But the decision was not to communicate externally like some organizations. But even that small step for us was movement, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the way that we were able as a legal team to partner with the other functions and to make this something that our coworkers could be proud of. We're certainly proud of it.
Thank you. And Lisa, I'm struck with how different your industry must be, not just, not tech. You guys are actually medical providers. And I think, you don't have to read too many tweets, whatever. We don't do it anymore. I'm just kidding. Tweets or posts or blogs or newspaper articles to see how forceful and aggressive the tech industry has been in having a very, very strong, prominent, repeat, disciplined voice in a lot of the social movement and political issues of the last few years. And I'm just curious how that feels for you as the head of a legal and governance organization, but being the intersection with so much from a medical provider perspective. How does fitting into today's political or social environment work when you are so heavily focused as a business organization on patient care?
Yeah, this one, I'm sure for all of us, has been super tricky. There's a lot of passionate employees who are very much mission driven and believe that certain positions, must be taken in order to deliver good care. So I think where we ended up philosophically was, at the end of the day, and it's hard because our headquarters are here, so you could skew San Francisco, right? But remember, we have patients as well as employees all over the country. Philosophically, we are a workplace and we provide care of inclusion. And that means we need to be able to accommodate different viewpoints. And we've expressed this to our employees. That being so we have not taken overt positions with respect to social justice issues or necessarily with respect to Dobbs. And this is when, as a leader, you really got to put on your leader hat and forget your personal viewpoints. It's hard. That being said, we are doing things where we feel like we can make the most impact and that accommodate for what we do. What do I mean? So, we want to deliver, our obligation is to deliver the best care in accordance with the standard of care, which is a medical term, right? And so we believe access to reproductive care is super important, and as well as transgender care. And so as part of the care we deliver to our patients. And so philosophically then we adjust our practices to do what we can as appropriate to deliver that kind of care. It's even further complicated by the fact that our providers, physicians, are putting themselves at risk in certain states, right, for delivering this kind of care. And so we need to make sure we have the support and the counseling to see how we can avert those situations. So it's tricky, but we view it from a standard of care, individual patient interactions, where we can get what we believe deliver the best care based on the provider's medical decision, not a political decision. So with respect to George Floyd as well, a lot of passion around that. And I think we felt like the best approach, again, was how can we make the most impact, even though we'd love to say more things, right? So we have a leader of DIEJ and BIPOC diversity. We have, one of the things I actually think is the most impactful is we put together a health equity domain working group where providers get together and develop practices and protocols that can help serve folks with diverse backgrounds. An African-American woman may need something different with respect to menopause care than white women like me. And you need to make sure that that's accommodated for as you practice. We have a number of employee research groups focused on BIPOC and other issues. And so we're trying to internally, turn the dial where we can. We do have a mission to recruit diverse candidates, and we have great diversity, particularly in our field operations. And so that's where we're putting the focus. It's not perfect, it may change, but that's how we've decided to handle this tricky issue.
So many common themes of flexibility and responsiveness. It is for sure a different environment than, when I was coming out of law school, which is like very wistful and nostalgic to talk about. It didn't occur to me to have a voice as an employee, right? And now we face a wonderful distinction with more of our employees being willing to speak openly and ask for participation in the way that our organizations impact our communities. So for sure, at least from my perspective, a welcome change, but one that as leaders, continually pushes us to evolve and be flexible. I would like to talk a little bit about retention, and you're, of course, very welcome to keep your remarks fresh to recent news of layoffs, Twitter-related or not. But on the opposite end of the barbell from quiet quitting is, of course, the work that we have done over the past few years in particular to rethink retention. Not just, can I retain someone in Idaho because they're great from a talent perspective, but how do I think about careers of the people on my teams over time? What is important to the employee base about retention? How do I keep people, particularly for folks in the tech environment? We're watching, the great equity value promised to employees get a little shaky, or maybe a little stale, and as a comparator to previous years of up and to the right. So in today's landscape, and we should talk about the retentive equity values that are changing, but for each of you, I think a very different landscape than what we spend a lot of time reading about in the local tech news about equity value. You still face retention issues, just like everyone else. And how do you think about those now that the market is a little softer? that that we aren't in the exact kind of talent where we were a year ago. Are you changing the way you think about retention? Are you rethinking what you do from a program perspective at different levels of seniority? Talk to us a little bit about how you think that that works, Lisa, particularly, and albeit you're in the middle of a change of control transaction yourself, but particularly as a newly public company, how do you get your head around all those issues of retention?
It's been evolving. I think in a 52-week period, our stock went from 52 to 8. And that was really despite actually meeting and beating our quarterly results. So our employees were like, what? And when you're newly public, you're not necessarily at benchmark for salary and bonus. And so equity is the big carrot there. So, from a pure financial perspective, we thought about it before the Amazon transaction. We gave folks additional grants at the $8 price, right? So that, they had some upside, assuming that the stock would at least go up from there, because their grants the prior year had been at 42, right? And we again kind of focused on the mission. I know I keep coming back to that, but even before the stock price tanked, people could have gone elsewhere. My legal team could have gone elsewhere and made a lot more money. And so trying to incent them to stay was about the mission, was about the opportunities they have to do new things, because we get a new issue every day. We focused really on building a more definite and clear career paths and different options for folks, and I think that helped. So I was feeling good about things, and then of course we signed a potential acquisition by Amazon in July, and we had to, we as an organization had to think about things a little differently. There was stability in the stock price because it was sort of a little bit discounted from the share price that Amazon has agreed to pay. But it was but it was also flat too, no upside. But more importantly, it was a major change, right? Having a much larger company come in. And so I think we did a couple of things. Of course, we did cash retention bonuses for folks that we really needed to stay. But more importantly, we went back to like a narrative about how exciting this potential combination could be, right? How it could help us really expand our mission. We're a capital-intensive business, takes a lot of money, and how this could be the best place to practice healthcare law, right? With the scale and stability that's potentially offered by Amazon. So
Commissioner, do you
it
hear
was
me?
more about getting them excited about that, but we did do some retentive stuff. Now, we haven't really adjusted our thinking yet, given the
Hello, Commissioner,
the
do you hear
recent
me?
layoffs as a company. We're still focused because we have, believe you me, we're a tech company and a healthcare company. And so the employees benchmark their salaries against the tech employees against Google and Facebook, and the clinical employees against the big health systems, right? So we're always behind. But
Hello, Commissioner, do you hear me?
we're taking prudent steps, but we're not really changing any of our thinking. about
I do
retention
hear you.
just yet. Seemed a little too early.
And Stevie, I just want you to know, if you want to hire me at IKEA, I'll do it for the ice cream. So no problem. How do you think about the retention landscape as a private company? And one, obviously very focused on the US, but you also have to hold and balance all these other geographies from sort of a competitive perspective as the backdrop to where you sit from a US perspective. How are you thinking about retention today?
It's I don't think any large organization will ever escape this, but you layer in some of the the recent events and
Okay,
of
so you're
course, the
saying there's a
pandemic.
chance that you're going to go
I
offline?
think that our biggest competitors, Wayfair, Amazon, from a retail perspective, have
Okay.
definitely
We'll stand by.
swooped in and
All right.
taken talent. But you're right, it's a private company. It's not as though we can offer certain deals just based on options. But again, when I go back to the value system of our organization, IKEA is a place where the majority of the retail managers, i.e. CEOs in the various IKEA countries, started out as a 19-year-old part-time forklift driver. And so there are very few companies where you can ascend, from the very bottom of the organization
If it's possible,
to the
could
top
you
of the
please stay
organization
logged in?
anymore, just by sheer will and opportunity, and not necessarily where your degree came from. And so IKEA is this opportunity, it's a place of opportunity. And so, like Lisa was saying, we focus on career pathing. And when you put on top of that our diversity initiatives and creating this place where everyone can
Okay,
see themselves, in a different place, that has
We're going to send you
definitely
a little bit of the feed
impacted
of the live
positively
stage right now.
on the workforce. I think also we have some opportunities for sabbaticals. And again, at IKEA, if you take a leave, it's not career suicide, even at the corporate level. And so the fact that you can take a sabbatical, or we have expanded parental leaves that mirror European leaves in this area. So, it has to be a life choice for someone. We're not going to be able to give you this, huge financial incentive to stay at IKEA. It's whether or not the lifestyle fits you, whether or not you see yourself in a
Are
different
you here in our stage?
area of the organization, whether it's here in the U.S. or globally. It just has to be the right place for you, and that's a personal decision. So I think that we've approached it in a way where we can control as much as we can control, and what we can't, we just wait and see.
I love the theme that keeps coming out here about mission and repeating what it is to be connected to a mission and what that means for your teams and for your leadership in your own roles. Just a speed round here, and I'm pretty sure this clock still isn't right. So Adam, are you about to call us down? Yeah, okay, speed round really quickly. What are the one or two non-negotiables that you demand in building a world-class in-house legal team? Each of you are heralded by your peers for having done so. So what is it that stands out as you build your own teams?
Quickly, I want to hire people who are all about team. There's plenty of smart lawyers out there, but we deal with a lot of tricky and hard issues, and if you don't have the right personality is the wrong word, but right attitude around working with the team, being flexible, being nimble, then you can see how it really impedes the work we get done. The second thing I would say is, legal operations to scale. I want my lawyers, I want them to be working on high value work, and there's a lot of, as we know, a lot of low value but high effort work in the legal field. And so to the extent we can have processes and technologies and other options for that, and it helps you scale. So that the people can focus on the high value work.
I would agree. I think that it's important to be relational because we support so many different functions, and the mindset about what your role is has to be forefront. I think also this idea that you've come from. I have some lawyers that have come from big law, and your perspective in big law is very different. And when you come in house, and knowing that at the end of the day, it's the business decision, and you have to teach yourself to be okay with that, even if you think about all this exposure. I think that's probably the biggest curve that I have for some on my team, but we all get there.
Well, thank you for your insight and time talking about some pretty delicate and personal human pieces. So very, very grateful to spend some time with you guys on the stage today, and just a pleasure.
Thank you very much.